Alright, Fat Cat 72 here. I'm going to be doing an update to my Korvold Fate-Cursed King EDH deck. The main strategy with this deck is to abuse Korvold's draw and sacrifice abilities to get enough counters on him to swing for lethal, although sometimes you can win with just drawing a lot of cards and dealing damage with other creatures, but most of the time with this deck, we're going to be winning with Korvold himself through combat damage or by flinging him at our opponent for excessive amounts. Starting with the creatures, since the main focus of the deck is sacrificing, I have a bunch of creatures that let me sacrifice things. Sadistic Hypnotist lets me sacrifice things to control my opponent's hand, which is very strong. We've got Prosh, who used to be the commander of the deck until Korvold was printed. He comes in with a lot of bodies, which is good, and he has a built-in sacrifice trigger. We've got two pretty identical cards in the Bloodflow Connoisseur and the Bloodthrown Vampire. They just both let you sacrifice a creature to make themselves stronger. And the Priest of the Forgotten Gods. I'm thinking about taking this card out, but it's alright. You have to sacrifice two other creatures. Your opponent loses two and sacrifices a creature, and then you get to add 2 mana and draw a card. Then we have the utility creatures. We've got Blood Artist, pretty self-explanatory, and Poison Tip Archer. Both benefit from creatures dying, deal my opponent some damage. The Archer is also good defense with its reach and death touch. Then we have Nath of the Gilt Leaf. Whenever my opponent discards a card, we get tokens, so he's pretty good with the Sadistic Hypnotist, because I can sacrifice a token, make my opponent discard 2, then I'll get 2 more tokens. And he's just a good incidental body. Then we've got the two creatures that like the graveyard. We've got Gerard. He gets stronger. Seeing as I'm going to be sacrificing some things, there'll be a lot of creatures in my graveyard for Gerard. And we have Eater of the Dead, which is my anti-graveyard strategy card. If my opponent's playing a graveyard deck, Eater of the Dead is pretty good to let me, at instant speed, take creatures out of their graveyard. Then we've got the creatures I want to sacrifice. We've got Emrakul's Evangel. If I have a few creatures out, he lets me replace them with tokens and get sacrifice triggers as well. Liege of the Hollows, a pretty interesting creature you don't see that much. Once it's sacrificed, I can create tokens equal to the amount of mana I want to put in. The Caustic Caterpillar, which works as a removal spell, but it's also a sacrifice trigger. And the Reassembling Skeletons, which I very much like in conjunction with Grave Pact to allow me to remove my opponent's whole board. But it is just a good creature to sacrifice because I can always play him from the graveyard. Rounding out the creature section, we've got some mana ramp with Llanowar Elves, Paradise Druid, Deathrite Shaman, Birds of Paradise, Sakura Tribe Elder, Burnished Heart, which is also a sacrifice trigger, and Dryad of the Elysian Grove for some mana fixing. Pretty straightforward there. Next, we'll move on to the enchantments. We've got the previously mentioned Grave Pact, very strong. When I'm sacrificing things, it makes my opponents get rid of things too. Revel in Riches. Creatures will be dying. I'll be getting treasures. Growing Rights of Itlimoc. Poor Man Gaia's Cradle. It's an interesting ETB. It's alright. Inseal Energy and Concordant Crossroads. 2 ways to give Korvold haste. Necropotence for card draw. And I think the most powerful enchantment in the deck, Squandered Resources. Lets me sacrifice my lands, whether they're tapped or untapped, for additional mana. So it's a sacrifice trigger, and it extends my plays by giving me more mana. For instants and sorceries, we have a few dedicated to mana ramp. Nature's Lore, Harrow, Skyshroud Claim, and Untamed Wilds. All to search lands out of the deck. We have some retrieval / search cards in Diabolic Tutor, Treasured Find to pull things from the graveyard, and Yawgmoth's Will, very strong graveyard recursion. For removal, we have Kindred Dominance, strong against tribal decks. Go for the throat. Pox, makes you sacrifice things, can work in conjunction with the commander, is also just good to annoy your opponents. Naturalize, Beast Within, Return to Nature for dealing with artifacts. Devour Flesh, can be used on yourself if you absolutely need it to. Tragic Slip, and Disintegrate, which exiles things over Fireball, which does not exile, which is why I play that. And then we've got the two finishing instants and sorceries in Fling. Sacrifice a creature, Fling deals damage equal to the creature's power to one target. And Berserk, which doubles the power of the card. Very good with Korvold to get in for that extra commander damage. As far as artifacts go, we'll start with the mana ramp. We have a Mind Stone, a Soul Ring, and a Basalt Monolith. Pretty straightforwards. We also have the Expedition map, which is a good sacrifice trigger. Gets me land as well. And then the four most important ones are Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, Altar of Dementia, and Zuran Orb, which all allow me to sacrifice creatures or lands in the case of Zuran Orb, which triggers my commander, allows me to draw cards, and will extend my plays by giving me mana in the case of Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar. We have Tormod's Crypt, which is just a free sacrifice trigger, also good against graveyard strategies. Snake Basket for some tokens. Crucible of Worlds for returning those lands that often get sent to the graveyard in this deck. Elixir of Immortality, again, a little bit of graveyard recursion, gains you some life in a pinch. And the Nevernal's Disc, I think one of the better artifacts in the game, especially in EDH. And then, equipment-wise, I'm running only a few. Blade of the Blood Chief, which is amazing with Korvold, because it allows you to put 2 counters on him and draw additional cards. Sword of Vengeance, and Swiftfoot Boots to give Korvold haste and other abilities. And Skull Clamp for drawing cards with my tokens. Moving on to the lands section of the deck, the basics are pretty straightforward. 3 mountains, 4 swamps, and 6 forests. So 13 basics. Then we have my utility lands in High Market for extra drawing and sacrificing if I need to. Temple of Malady and Temple of Abandon for scrying and mana fixing. Rogue's Passage for making Korvold unblockable. Reliquary Tower for extra card draw, or rather keeping more cards in my hand. Wasteland for getting rid of my opponent's problematic cards. Care Keep for creating tokens. The Wasteland also works very well in conjunction with the Crucible of Worlds, as it allows me to play it again and punish my opponent for playing too many basics, or non-basics rather. We have the Command Beacon, which lets me get Korvold back into my hand if he costs too much from being sent to the command zone a few times. We have a few fetch lands in Bloodstained Mire, Verdant Catacombs, Windswept Heath, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Mountain Valley. Ideally, these would all be original fetch lands, but this is what I have. These are all also, importantly, sacrifice triggers with Korvold, which allows you to draw more cards, make him stronger, yada yada yada. Then for mana fixing, I'm running Command Tower, City of Brass, Gemstone Mine, which sacrifices itself sometimes, the Woodland Cemetery, and Rootbound Crag, the one Shockland in Stomping Ground, a Pain Land in Llanowar Wastes, and 2 dual lands in Bayou and Taiga. And I think that's just about it. The deck plays very aggressively, and usually I try and establish a board state that includes a few creatures, a sacrifice outlet, and Korvold by about the 4th or 5th turn, so it's not the fastest, but it's hard to stop once it gets going, especially with squandered resources or Grave Pact to allow me to abuse my cards, or make my opponent sacrifice their cards, which in turn makes Korvold stronger, lets me draw more, and increases the chance that I'll be able to give him haste or make him strong enough to swing in for lethal commander damage. Usually, I try and kill the same turn I play Korvold, though sometimes you have to sit around and wait for a turn, but I never like doing that as it leaves him open for removal. This deck plays very similarly to how it played when I had Prosh in the deck, but I feel like Korvold is just a lot stronger and is the better choice if you're going to build red, black, green. I think you can build this in CEDH, though I am not very experienced in that format. I'd imagine it's possible. He seems pretty strong to me, but I think for that format you'd want to add in a lot more fast mana and try and reduce the curve of the deck, because I'm playing a lot of random cards or old cards that I like the flavor of that do function for the deck. I feel like you could make some exchanges to make it a little bit stronger and play like fast mana like Mox Diamond or Lotus Petal even, which would be a sacrifice trigger. Alright, I think that's going to wrap it up. I'm going to move on and make another update video for one of my other decks that I will be uploading later. Thank you and have a nice night.